Envy is not always loud or obvious. In fact, it often hides behind the most polished smiles and polite words. It doesn't walk into a room waving a red flag. Instead, it whispers softly, sometimes even sounding like support. One of the first ways to recognize envy is by learning how it speaks, not directly, but through tone, timing, and intention. People who envy you rarely admit it, not even to themselves. Instead, they wear masks, the mask of concern, the mask of casual indifference, or the mask of exaggerated praise. And if we're not paying attention, we may confuse these masks for genuine emotions. But envy leaves traces, and if you know where to look, you'll see them. Often, someone who envies you will give you a compliment that doesn't quite feel like a compliment. For example, they might say, "You got that promotion. Wow, must be nice to have connections." On the surface, it sounds like they're happy for you, but there's an undertone of suspicion or dismissal. The compliment is there, but so is a seed of doubt, an implication that you didn't really earn your success. That's one of the first signs of envy, the inability to celebrate you without qualifying your achievements. Another example is the timing of their attention. Someone who is genuinely supportive is consistent. They show up for you whether you're thriving or struggling. But those moved by envy tend to go silent when you shine. You might notice that they're less responsive to your good news, slow to reply to your messages when you're doing well, or awkwardly changing the subject when your accomplishments come up. Their silence speaks volumes. It's not always about what they say. It's about what they don't say. They may be present during your hardships, offering help or empathy, but the moment you succeed, they disappear. That contrast reveals a lot. Envy often reveals itself in absence, but envy can also be loud, just not in the way you might expect. Sometimes it shows up through sarcasm. Let's say you're excited about a new opportunity, and you tell a friend. Instead of encouragement, they respond with a smirk and a comment like, "Look at you moving up in the world. Don't forget the little people." It's wrapped in humor, but the message underneath is not friendly. That's another trait of envy. It tries to soften itself with jokes or casual remarks, but the emotional energy behind it is heavy. It doesn't want to uplift you. It wants to humble you. It wants to remind you not to feel too good about yourself. Envy also shows up as unsolicited advice that doesn't quite fit the situation, advice that feels more like a warning than guidance. After sharing good news, you might hear, "That's great, but be careful." That kind of success doesn't last forever. While it's always wise to stay grounded, these comments are often less about your well-being and more about curbing your joy. Envy hates to see someone too confident. It wants to introduce doubt, not wisdom. Recognizing envy also means paying attention to patterns over time. A one-off strange comment can be forgiven. But if someone consistently underplays your efforts, if their words often come with a sting, and if they seem most interested when things aren't going well for you, then you may be seeing the quiet workings of envy. And the danger in this is not just in what it does to you externally, it's in what it can do to your self-image. Repeated exposure to these small dismissals, these subtle digs, can begin to erode your confidence. That's why it's so important to spot envy early, not to fight it, but to protect yourself from absorbing its message. But here's the catch. Envy often disguises itself as something else entirely: support, admiration, even love. That's what makes it so tricky. We often want to believe that the people around us are rooting for us. We want to believe that their words are kind, that their advice is thoughtful, that their feedback is honest. But discernment is necessary. Not all compliments come from a place of love. Not all concern is genuine. And not every smile is sincere. The hardest part is that envy can come from people we care about, even those we consider friends or family. That makes recognizing it even more painful. But truth is more valuable than comfort. When you begin to notice the subtle clues, the patterns in speech, the passive-aggressive comments, the absence when you're doing well, you gain clarity. And with clarity, you gain the ability to respond with wisdom, not resentment. You don't have to call it out. You don't have to confront it. But you do have to acknowledge it to yourself, so it doesn't confuse you or make you shrink to keep someone else comfortable. The goal is not to judge those who envy you. Everyone experiences envy at some point in life. It's human. But when envy goes unexamined, it turns into behavior that poisons relationships. Recognizing it allows you to set boundaries, not walls. It helps you navigate conversations with awareness rather than defensiveness. You start to see who genuinely claps for you and who only claps when they're ahead. That clarity is powerful, and it keeps you emotionally honest with yourself and others. In the end, knowing how envy speaks, and when it chooses not to, will help you listen beyond words and stay rooted in truth. In a world where appearances often overshadow intentions, falsehood has learned to wear many clever disguises. It doesn't always come wrapped in lies that are easy to detect. More often, it creeps in through small contradictions, vague responses, and shifting versions of the same story. To recognize falsehood, especially in people close to us, we must train ourselves to notice what most overlook: the inconsistencies, the avoidance, and the emotional dissonance between what is said and what is meant. When we begin to listen carefully, not just to words but to patterns, we can spot the fractures in truth that reveal something deeper and more deliberate. One of the most telling signs of falsehood is inconsistency. Someone who is telling the truth tends to have a certain ease in their story, a steady rhythm that doesn't change no matter who's listening. Their answers align with their past words, their body language supports their speech, and their facts stay intact over time. But a person who isn't being truthful often struggles to keep the details straight. You might notice that their version of an event changes subtly depending on the context. They forget what they previously said, or they offer too much explanation in places where none is needed. This overcompensation is not confidence, it's cover. Take note of how someone answers simple questions. If their response feels overly rehearsed or strangely delayed, it might not be rooted in truth. Truth tends to be direct. It doesn't need long detours or protective language. A person hiding falsehood often hesitates, searching for the right way to spin things. They might use vague words like sort of, not exactly, or you know what I mean, without actually saying anything of substance. This vagueness is a kind of shield, allowing them room to backtrack if needed. That flexibility in language is not a mistake. It's a strategy. Another common tactic used by people who engage in falsehood is redirecting the conversation. If you ask a direct question and the person replies with a question of their own, a joke, or suddenly becomes defensive, it's often a sign they're uncomfortable with the truth. Deflection keeps you from reaching clarity. Instead of offering a straight answer, they might challenge your intentions. Why would you ask me that? Or you don't trust me. This move shifts the focus away from the facts and onto your character. It's manipulative, and it's meant to blur the lines between offense and defense. In recognizing this, you protect yourself from being guilted into silence. Falsehood also relies heavily on emotional manipulation. A dishonest person might use charm or excessive emotion to create a sense of connection, hoping that warmth will blind you to their contradictions. They'll flatter you, agree with you, or share personal stories at just the right moments, not necessarily to bond with you, but to manage how you see them. They may even cry or become overly expressive when confronted, not because they are hurt, but because strong emotion makes us hesitate. It makes us second guess our intuition. That hesitation is exactly what a deceiver wants. Pay close attention to people who rarely take responsibility. Someone who lies or misleads often shifts blame onto others. Nothing is ever their fault. Not the missed appointment, not the broken trust, not the changed plans. It's always because of someone else, some misunderstood situation, or some exaggerated emergency. This pattern of deflecting blame, no matter how small the issue, reveals a deeper unwillingness to be honest. And over time, these small lies add up. They form a character trait, not just an occasional error. You might also notice how someone handles being caught. An honest person, when proven wrong, may be embarrassed or upset, but they'll usually acknowledge the truth and try to correct the mistake. A dishonest person, however, will either deny the evidence outright, make excuses, or change the topic entirely. They might even accuse you of overreacting or claim they don't remember what they said. This kind of gaslighting is a major indicator of falsehood. It seeks not just to deny truth, but to undermine your sense of reality. It's important to remember that not all lies are spoken. Falsehood is often communicated through silence, avoidance, or selective sharing. If someone consistently leaves out key details, or you always have to dig to get the full story, chances are they are hiding something. Truth doesn't hide. Even when it's difficult, it shows up. But falsehood will always find a way to delay, distort, or disappear. Recognizing these patterns isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about protecting your peace and surrounding yourself with people who value honesty. You don't need perfect people. You need people who tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. The truth builds clarity. Falsehood creates confusion, and the more confused you feel around someone, the more closely you should listen not just to their words, but to the space between them. You may even notice a link between falsehood and envy. Someone who envies you might also lie to keep you at a disadvantage, to manipulate how you see yourself or how others see you. Their dishonesty might show up as fake support, as hidden motives disguised as help, or as carefully curated half-truths that place them in a better light. That's why recognizing falsehood is about more than catching a lie. It's about understanding emotional strategy. We live in a time where authenticity is rare and often uncomfortable, yet it's exactly what we need to build real trust. When you learn to notice inconsistencies, to listen to what's missing, and to ask yourself whether the story aligns with what you've experienced, you empower yourself. You stop getting pulled into narratives that drain you or mislead you. You grow stronger, clearer, and more grounded in what's real. The truth doesn't fear being questioned, but falsehood always does. One of the most reliable ways to recognize both envy and falsehood is to pay attention to emotional shifts, the subtle, almost invisible changes in a person's energy, tone, and behavior when you speak about your life, especially your growth or happiness. While words can be practiced, emotions are much harder to control. People may speak supportively, but their facial expressions, body language, and timing often say otherwise. When someone envies you or is being dishonest with you, their emotional response tends to betray their true feelings. The key is to train yourself to listen not only with your ears, but with your eyes, your gut, and your memory. There's a certain lightness and warmth that genuine people radiate when they're truly happy for you. They don't just smile, their whole presence feels open. You can feel their energy matching your joy. Now contrast that with someone who forces a smile, whose tone goes slightly flat, or who quickly changes the subject when you talk about something positive in your life. The shift may be subtle. A slight pause, a flicker in their eyes, a tightness in their body, but it's there. That's the kind of signal envy sends when it tries to stay hidden. It doesn't want to celebrate you. It wants to manage its discomfort quietly. You might share something meaningful, maybe a new opportunity, a moment of success, or simply something that brought you joy. And notice the conversation doesn't expand from there. Instead of asking follow-up questions, the other person might nod and give a lukewarm "that's cool." Or even worse, follow your excitement with their own story meant to overshadow yours. They might talk about how they did something similar, only bigger or better, shifting the focus back to themselves. This isn't just narcissism, it's often driven by envy, that internal discomfort they feel when someone else is doing well. The same goes for falsehood. When someone is not being honest with you, their emotions often don't line up with their words. They might offer reassurances, but something about the delivery feels off. Their face may be calm, but their eyes dart away. They may say they're happy for you, but their voice sounds dull or detached. Or perhaps their expression tightens in the corners, just slightly, when you mention a new chapter in your life. These emotional mismatches are not accidents. They're leaks from a mind trying to manage an internal conflict it doesn't want to admit. Another common emotional clue is forced enthusiasm. Sometimes people who envy you or are being dishonest will try too hard to appear excited. Their reactions are over the top, exaggerated, even unnatural. They might say things like, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of you," with a tone that doesn't match the words. The timing feels off. Their body language is too stiff or too animated. Why? Because they're trying to perform the emotion rather than feel it. Real pride, real happiness for someone else is effortless. It flows with ease. When it's being faked, you can almost always feel the disconnect. There's also something to be said for how people behave when you're going through challenges. It's easy for someone to appear supportive when you're down, when you're in need. Envy feels less threatened then, but the emotional shifts become more visible when things begin to go right for you. The same people who were present and attentive during your low moments may become distant, critical, or even passive, aggressive when you're rising. This change is painful to witness, but it's incredibly revealing. Their loyalty wasn't to you. It was to the version of you that didn't challenge their comfort. One of the hardest parts of navigating these emotional shifts is the internal conflict it creates. You might feel guilty for noticing them, questioning whether you're being paranoid or judgmental. That's what envy and falsehood often count on, that you'll doubt yourself instead of trusting what your intuition is telling you. But intuition is rarely wrong when it speaks through emotion. If someone's presence makes you feel smaller just when you should be feeling proud, or if their energy pulls away every time you step forward, you need to pay attention. Those shifts are not just in your head, they are clues. This is why it's so important to observe people over time. One moment of awkwardness can be overlooked, but repeated emotional distance, especially in response to your growth, is not random. It becomes a pattern. Maybe they stop liking your posts, stop reaching out, stop celebrating your small wins. Maybe their tone changes from warm to cool when you talk about your goals. These are not coincidences. They're emotional markers of deeper truth, truths they don't want to say out loud, but can't fully hide either. It's also worth noting that some people will mask envy or dishonesty with concern. They'll offer warnings instead of encouragement, cloaking their discomfort as care. "I just don't want you to get hurt," they might say, or "don't get too excited. Things change fast." These statements are sometimes genuine, but when they consistently accompany your successes, they become tools of doubt, not love. Real concern empowers you. False concern restrains you. Again, it comes back to how you feel around their words. Do you leave the conversation feeling uplifted or uncertain? Our emotional world is full of information, if we know how to listen. Recognizing emotional shifts helps us see beyond the surface and into the motivations people try to hide. It protects us from being pulled into relationships that drain our confidence or blur our reality. And it helps us move closer to those who are truly aligned with us, not just in our pain, but in our growth. Always remember that emotions don't lie, even when words do. There's a particular kind of envy that doesn't shout, doesn't argue, and doesn't try to stop you directly. Instead, it imitates you. It observes your choices, mirrors your behavior, sometimes even copies your style, your tone, your ideas. On the surface, it can look like admiration. It can feel flattering at first until you realize there's no real appreciation behind the imitation. There's no credit, no acknowledgement, no respect. This is a subtle but powerful sign of envy. Someone who mimics you but never uplifts you. Someone who uses your light to shape their own image while quietly trying to dim yours. It can start innocently. You share something creative, and suddenly they post something eerily similar. You express a new goal, and not long after, they adopt the same one, claiming it as if it were theirs all along. It's not always obvious because the world encourages inspiration. We all learn from one another, and there's nothing wrong with that. But envy doesn't learn to grow. It mimics to compete. It doesn't ask how you did it so it can improve. It observes so it can match or outshine. That's where the energy shifts. What once felt mutual begins to feel like a rivalry you never agreed to. One way to distinguish admiration from envy is through acknowledgement. When someone genuinely admires you, they're not shy about it. They'll say things like, "That inspired me," or "I saw you do that, and it gave me the idea." They don't pretend they invented the path. They give you your flowers while walking their own. But someone driven by envy will stay silent. They won't admit your influence because to do so would be to elevate you. And envy doesn't want to elevate, it wants to equalize or surpass. Another thing to look for is how they react when you change. Do they grow with you, or do they adjust themselves to follow you without acknowledgement? There's a difference between parallel growth and silent competition. When you evolve, a true peer evolves too, but from within, based on their own drive. The envious imitator, however, evolves as a reaction. Their growth isn't grounded in purpose, it's reactive, performative, and often rushed. They want to keep up, not because they are inspired by your values, but because your success challenges their sense of self-worth. This kind of imitation can also show up in how they speak. Over time, you might notice that someone starts using your phrases, echoing your language, taking on your mannerisms. Again, some overlap is natural between people who spend time together. But when it becomes frequent, when their voice starts to feel like an echo of yours, and when they do so without any real connection to the meaning behind your words, you're seeing imitation without admiration. It's a performance one that draws from you without ever giving anything back. It can feel especially disorienting when this happens in close relationships. A friend or colleague who once felt like an ally may begin to subtly compete. They might show support on the surface, but underneath there's tension. They want your audience, your recognition, your momentum, and because they don't want to admit it, not to you, not even to themselves, they copy you while pretending they aren't. That contradiction creates a strange emotional energy between you. Conversations feel shallow, the mutual respect feels like it's eroding, and you begin to sense that you're no longer being seen but studied. What makes this so dangerous is how easy it is to miss. Because envy, when masked by imitation, can look a lot like loyalty. It can appear as closeness, shared interests, or common goals. But the absence of acknowledgement is the giveaway. If someone is repeatedly benefiting from your ideas, your presence, your energy, but they never credit you, never lift you up publicly, never express gratitude or admiration, then you're likely dealing with silent envy. It doesn't have to be loud to be harmful. This behavior also connects to falsehood because it's dishonest at its core. Imitating someone without acknowledging them is a kind of theft. It's not always malicious, but it's not sincere either. And when someone takes from you while pretending they didn't, they're not just borrowing, they're hiding. They're hiding their insecurity, their envy, and their fear of being left behind. And instead of doing the work to build their own voice, they build a version of yours and wear it like a costume. The best way to respond to this isn't to confront or accuse, it's to observe and distance. Let their imitation be their boundary. You don't need to fight for recognition from someone who refuses to offer it. You don't need to protect your light by dimming it so others feel less threatened. What you do need is clarity, the clarity to know when someone is reflecting your brilliance only because they fear they have none of their own. And as painful as it can be, imitation without admiration reveals something useful. It shows you who sees you not as a friend but as a blueprint. And that realization, while disappointing, is freeing. It allows you to stop seeking validation from those who only mimic your surface, but never value your depth. In the bigger picture, it also reminds us of the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who aren't afraid to give credit, to celebrate us openly, and to cheer for us without turning our success into a threat, because those are the people who will not only walk beside you, but help you carry the weight of your growth without trying to take it as their own. When imitation replaces admiration, it's time to stop explaining yourself and start honoring what your presence reveals in others, even when it makes them uncomfortable. There is a particular form of envy and falsehood that hides behind smiles, compliments, and laughter. It doesn't confront you openly or express disapproval directly. Instead, it operates in the shadows, using sarcasm, subtle jabs, and passive-aggressive humor to make its presence felt. This behavior is often excused as harmless teasing or just joking, but underneath it lies something deeper and more calculated. When someone consistently makes you the punchline, even in front of others, while pretending it's all in fun, they are not just being playful. They are expressing envy or resentment in disguise. These small verbal attacks may seem trivial at first. A remark about your outfit that comes with a laugh, a backhanded compliment about your achievements, or a sarcastic comment on your personality. Each one lands lightly but leaves a mark. Over time, they form a pattern, and it's in that pattern that the real message hides. People who struggle with envy or unspoken competition often lack the courage or self-awareness to say how they really feel, so they weaponize humor. It becomes their safe zone, their mask, allowing them to express criticism without being held accountable. The tricky part is that these comments are often framed in ways that make you doubt yourself. They're said with a smile, maybe even in front of others, and followed by "I'm just playing," or "don't be so sensitive." These phrases are not innocent. They are tools used to flip the dynamic suddenly. You're the problem for reacting. You're the one who can't take a joke. This tactic creates emotional confusion. It discourages you from defending yourself and trains you to stay silent, even when you feel hurt or disrespected. What's happening here is a subtle form of emotional control. By disguising criticism as humor, envious or dishonest people maintain the appearance of friendliness while keeping you uncertain and off balance. They don't want to support you fully, but they don't want to be seen as openly unsupportive either. So they walk a fine line, just close enough to pass as a friend, but just distant enough to keep you questioning their true intentions. One of the clearest indicators of this behavior is how you feel after interacting with them. If you leave conversations feeling a little smaller, a little more doubtful of yourself, or quietly irritated without knowing exactly why, pay attention. That discomfort is your emotional guidance system telling you something is off. Words carry weight even when they're dressed as jokes. And when humor is used to chip away at your confidence, it's not playful, it's harmful. This kind of falsehood is especially insidious because it often goes unnoticed by others. Outsiders might laugh along, thinking it's all lighthearted, but you, the target, feel the sting. And if you try to explain it to others, they might say, "I didn't think they meant anything by it." Or "They're always joking like that." That's the trap. The very subtlety that protects the envious person also isolates you. You're left wondering if you're overreacting, when in reality, you're being strategically diminished. People who behave this way often have difficulty expressing vulnerability. Rather than admitting they feel insecure, competitive, or envious, they lash out in socially acceptable ways. They mock what they wish they had, or what they feel threatened by. And because they fear looking openly jealous, they cover it with charm or wit. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that their jokes tend to target areas where you shine, your creativity, your confidence, your growth. They don't poke fun randomly. They aim for what bothers them most. Sometimes this behavior intensifies when you're doing well. As you grow, as your life expands, the jokes become sharper, more frequent, and harder to ignore. This is because your success is triggering something in them they don't want to face. And rather than doing the inner work to examine those feelings, they externalize it through subtle sabotage. Their humor becomes a way to level the playing field without appearing unkind. But make no mistake, when humor is used to consistently undercut someone, it's not humor. It's hostility with a smile. It's also worth recognizing that this kind of behavior doesn't just reveal envy. It reveals a kind of dishonesty too. A person who uses humor to criticize is rarely honest about their intentions. If confronted, they deflect or deny. They might say, "You're reading into things," or "I didn't mean it that way." The truth is, they did mean it that way. They just don't want to admit it. Because to admit it would expose the envy they're trying so hard to hide. The way forward isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's quiet distance. When someone consistently uses you as a target for their jokes, you don't need to prove them wrong or make them see what they're doing. You just need to recognize that their humor isn't about you. It's about them. It's about their discomfort with your confidence, their unease with your joy. And once you understand that, their words lose power. You also begin to develop deeper discernment. You stop assuming that everyone who laughs with you is for you. You stop mistaking proximity for loyalty. And you start listening not just to what people say, but how they say it and how you feel afterward. That feeling is never wrong. It's there to guide you toward relationships that affirm your growth rather than mock it. In the end, real support feels safe, it feels kind, it builds you up even when it's teasing, and when someone truly loves or respects you, their humor is rooted in connection, not competition. So when jokes are used to disguise envy or to express what someone is too dishonest to admit, trust the tone, not just the words. That's where the truth always lies.